connection, sorry.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, welcome everyone. The October 6th, 2020 meeting of the City of Oneonta Common Council is hereby called to order. I will call the roll. Councilmember Murphy.
Here.
Councilmember Davies.
Here.
Councilmember Risberger.
Here.
Councilmember Lepari Shu.
Here.
Councilmember Carson.
Here.
Councilmember Harrington.
Here.
Councilmember Rafter.
Here.
And Councilmember Drenick.
Here.
Okay, the gang is all here. I will give a brief report of things that are happening this week. We have a lot to discuss tonight, so I'll try to keep it brief. Number one, our Community Advisory Board to the Oneonta Police Department will have their first meeting this Thursday at 7 p.m. It will be live streamed on the city's YouTube page. It will be recorded, so if people cannot view it live, it will live on the YouTube page where people can view it. The chair of the committee will be Biama Charles, who is the Director of Diversity and Inclusion at Hartwick College. There was one replacement member of the board. That was the student from SUNY Oneonta, graduated. Good for her since she was appointed. So a new student will be taking her place, and I don't have her name in front of me, but she will be available for tomorrow. Update on the Downtown Improvement Fund. You'll remember that that is the part of the DRI in which we set aside over $2 million in grants for our local businesses. Through many delays, most recently as a result of COVID, we seem to be back on track, which is really good news. And Mark Drenick is helping us along this week on that. We have approximately 6 downtown businesses that are ready to go. Their contractors have been selected, contracts are in place. They are just waiting for the contractors to show up and get the work done. These are either signage or facade improvements. We have approximately another 10 that are in the process of getting things finalized with the contractor. So that is good news. And then we have some that are a little not as far down the process, but are working towards getting to the point where their projects can get underway. So that is good news. This has gone on much longer than we had hoped. We ran into several unexpected snags, being that we're doing something that nobody ever did before. You can't always foresee the kind of problems that come up, but we are back on track, and we should start to see some real results in our downtown. So that is excellent news, and we're glad to see that moving forward. The control, some good things happening in bringing our efforts to bring our college students back in a good, trusting relationship with the community and with our business community. The members of the SUNY control group are teaming up with members of with students and business owners in a group that Mark Drenick has put together to try to get everybody back into feeling comfortable with each other and trusting each other. Some of the efforts that are being undertaken are the students are developing a social media campaign designed to spread the word about how to keep safe, how to be in compliance, how to keep each other safe. Also efforts to bring our business owners in closer partnership with the students. There'll be several efforts that there will be taking place, including having the students work with our business owners in helping them to create some of the holiday displays for their businesses. So more of this to come going forward. Maybe a little later, I'll give Mark Drenick a chance to provide an update if he likes on what's going on. But these are good things that are happening. In addition, Hartwick College, we have an ongoing group of Hartwick College students and staff meeting with city and community members. That is designed to, again, strengthen the relationship between Hartwick College, Hartwick College of students, city, and community. And that group should be underway. We expected to get it underway in early this fall, beginning of September. With all that was going on with COVID, we delayed it, but we should be getting close to getting that going forward soon. And Len Carson will be representing the council on that group. And so as soon as I have some more words, some more information on exactly when we'll begin, I'll get back to you with that. This week, I think that we have will be going into some serious consideration of two very important issues that are going to require some tough decisions. One will be, we'll get deeper into the development of the 2021 budget. There'll be a budget meeting on October 15th, next Wednesday at 7 p.m. Again, for the public, that will be live streamed on our YouTube channel. Needless to say, there'll be some really tough decisions in the 2021 budget, dealing with questions regarding potential tax increases, infrastructure projects, impact on keeping them timely, keeping all services that people of the city deserve and expect, maintaining jobs of all our employees. It's going to be a challenge. We took, I think, another little bit of a hit today. It's yesterday I had a conversation with Senator Schumer's office. They expressed some cautious optimism on a stimulus bill that was being negotiated between Nancy Pelosi and Steve Mnuchin that would contain a sizable amount of assistance to municipalities. Word is that just this afternoon, President Trump ordered the Republicans to shut down all talks of any additional stimulus bill, which pretty much closes the door on any assistance to us, at least between now and Election Day. So that was the one thing we were hoping could provide some relief, as we go forward in closing out this year and in planning for the 2021 budget. Unfortunately, it doesn't look like that's going to happen. The other issue which we will be tackling will be filling the position that is now vacant for the city manager. I've identified 3 steps, at least 3 steps, and maybe more, as we go forward in that. The first is discussion as to whether there is value to bringing in an interim city manager. And that discussion will happen tonight. The second step would be working to better define exactly what is needed in that at this time and place with that position. And then the third step would be defining the search selection process for selecting the proper individual to fill that. So what I think I'll do is take break things up a little bit so I don't keep on talking. Why don't we go to the board and commission reports and the committee reports, and then after that, we'll go into the discussion regarding the interim city manager discussion.
Gary, can I ask a quick question? I just want to verify. You said that the budget meeting was October 15th on Wednesday. Did you mean you meant October 15th, the Thursday, correct? Not October 14th on the Wednesday?
Well, that is a good question. Let's see what the calendar shows. October 15th, Thursday. If I said Wednesday, that was incorrect.
Okay,
October
I just wanted to
15th,
verify.
Thursday. Nope.
Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you for pointing that out. October 15th, Thursday. Okay, let's go to boards and commission reports. Commission on Community Relations and Human Rights. Councilmember Murphy, where is that boomer? Somewhere. Oh, there it is.
Thank you, Mayor. It was a good meeting. It was a little bit different. We didn't have quorum until about halfway through, so the initial half of the meeting was just kind of a informal discussion because nothing could be moved forward. However, as we reached quorum, we discussed a couple of things. We did meet on Thursday, September. Oh my goodness! Now Thursday, September 24th, I believe it was. And there's a couple things we talked about. The new CEO from Job Corps asked if we'd be willing to do a training for them going forward. We thought this would be a great idea. However, we would like to have heard a little bit more specifics going forward. So we didn't really take any action at this time until we get a little bit more information from them. And another issue that was brought up is something that I will be working on, and we'll go into more depth as I have more detail. Is it was brought to our attention that there is a monument in Neowa Park, I believe by River Street, and it has some unfortunately quite racist language in there in regards to the Native American community. So I will be working with folks in the area to see what we can do to address that. The language as well as some of the historical interpretation with it. And I believe that was the entirety of the meeting.
Any questions? Okay, great. Thank you. Let's go to Zoning and Housing Board of Appeals. I believe that's Councilmember Risberger.
No, that's me.
Rafter. Oh, I'm sorry.
That's quite all right.
Rafter.
There were 3 items that were discussed, and one had to do with 18 Fair Street, Nonianta, and that had to do with some issues around a residential, excuse me, a garage and construction of a new garage. And there were boundary issues. This is a very clustered neighborhood. Things are close to one another. And things were done without complete involvement by code, and the decision was made to table that decision on that until some of these issues regarding where the garage was sitting in the borders, property lines, etc., could be resolved by the neighbors and represented to satisfaction of the zoning board. And second issue had to do with installing a 630 square foot carport, and that had to do with property at 164 Chestnut Street. That was not permitted for a variety of reasons, but that's that. And though I would like to talk later to Len, that's in his ward, and having to do a bit with an issue regarding people who are aging and trying to do something with their property that would make it more possible for them to remain to age in their homes, but what they want to do is against the code. So we can discuss that at some other point. And then there was a third issue that was at 13 Spruce Street. Excuse me for my Florida. I have a tongue paralysis on this side, and it was to reconfigure a garage so it could be used as a single operator hair salon, and that was approved, and that was all that happened. Any questions or thoughts?
Not a question, John, but I will reach out to you and talk
Great.
about that residence. Thank you.
If there are no further questions, we'll go to Board of Public Service, Councilmember Drenick.
Yep, Board of Public Service met on October 1st, and it was a busy schedule. So we'll start with 20 Fair Street. Water and sewer bill appeal was denied. The meter is working. It's the case also at 396 Chestnut Street. 36 Cherry Street is a blighted property and has been for a while. The owner was given a time frame for action. He hasn't done anything at this moment. The excuse, it's a reasonable excuse. He's in the guard, but nonetheless, he needs to do something with the property. So he's been asked again to submit a plan to code. He's got 30 days to do that. 18 Cherry Street, which is that land bank property that was taken down, you know, the house that was taken down. There was an order to have a tree removed, and somehow or another that got missed. So that order has been renewed. 4 Railroad Avenue, which is Nate's that burned down. That's now been declared an unsafe building based on the fire damage, and it's been ordered demolished. 185 to 187 Chestnut Street, there was an admin fee for a heating inspection appeal. It was a mix-up with the new property owner, and apparently a state inspection was performed, but the city wasn't notified, understanding that the admin fee has been vacated on that. A couple of updates on water leaks, 296 Main Street, it's being fixed. 17 Schoolhouse Lane, water leak, water's off now, the home is for sale. At 8 3rd Street, a new landlord, new to that property, purchased it, was trying to get in to do an inspection. Of course, the coronavirus is, is a roadblock to an awful lot of things. Finally able to get an inspection in on September the 27th. And as the inspection took place, it was noticed that there were boxes everywhere, as if somebody had moved in from a bigger place. Garbage bags on the deck, and day-old food and feces. Yeah, it's a job I wouldn't want. Anyway, no smoke detectors, but the big thing is multiple residents kept popping up. Ultimately, they counted 9, he counted 9 people in the house, including a baby, and then went downstairs and found that there was a room framed up in the basement with a dirt floor, a cot, and a TV. So yeah, so that is, just to reiterate the address on it for, it's 8 3rd Street. So I think that's you, Luke. In any case, it's been ordered vacated and repaired. Not as bad a tenancy issue, but still not great. At 22 West Street, apartment 1, a tenant in the apartment 1, which is downstairs, had his power shut off, but he's managed to grab electric from upstairs with, some, wiring of his own devising and candles and what have you. It's been declared unsafe. They need to get that tenant out of there. And so by declaring that entire building unsafe for the short term, they'll be able to do that. And finally, at 5 to 7 Union Street, the owner would like to take down the garage. And so it's been ordered demolished. And that was the extent of the Public Service Board meeting. Questions? Okay.
Okay, hearing no questions. Thank you, Mark. That was certainly an interesting report. And we'll go to Parks and Rec, Councilmember LaParisio.
Yeah, Parks and Rec met yesterday. The summer season, or what there was of it, is kind of winding down. So it was really just kind of a wrap up from Lou on where we are on parks projects. So we talked about the court resurfacing, which the council voted on a couple meetings ago in terms of funding, and that is underway and should be finished. I think she said by the end of the month, but definitely before it snows. She's also well in progress of giving the application fees and user fees and all that good stuff back to basically everyone who thought that they were going to be able to do something fun in our parks this year and didn't get to. Lou updated us on the fish in the Hodges pond. They are going to be relocated back to the mill race where they came from, so that we can prepare to dredge Hodges pond probably in the spring. The lights around Hodges pond are also going to be changed just a bit. They're going to be angled out into the surrounding area slightly more than right now. They're focused right on the pond. So the commission gave the okay for that. And then we sort of off agenda, we had 2 bits of discussion. One was to commend the people who put together the ferry land in Wilbur Park. It was just a really nice thing to do that the community really got involved in and enjoyed. So we talked about how great that was. And then we also got the news that Vince, our chair, is going to be retiring from his seat on the Parks Commission at the end of the year. So that was a bummer, but he's gonna like winter in Florida, so don't feel too bad. And that's it.
Katie,
Any
is there,
questions?
yeah, I've got a question. Sorry.
Yeah.
Was there any talk about what will happen with that ferry land over the winter?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, what's going to happen? I always wondered about that since it's relatively new.
I don't know if it's been done yet, but the scoop is that they're going to pick it up and then put out like painted rocks that say like see you in the spring or something like that, and then just reestablish it in the spring.
Okay, that's a good idea.
Yeah, good question. Len?
Len, go ahead.
Thank you. So Katie, you mentioned that they plan on dredging the pond in the spring.
Yeah.
Did they mention any project costs?
So that is something that we have talked about previously, but I don't have that in front of me right now. But I can get that information to you. Yeah, it has something to do with abatement of like a fungus.
Is this emergency work or is this something that's been on the project list to be done?
We've been talking about it since the beginning of the year on parks. So it's been a while coming. Basically, there's this type of organism that thrives in like the shallow water. So we need to make the pond deeper so that this organism will go away. I wouldn't call it an emergency. I know it's something that's been on the parks plan for a while. If Greg is here, he probably has more info on that than I do.
Okay, and then you mentioned that the fees, the application fees we're giving back. If I remember correctly from our finance meeting, seeing some notes, that's approximately like $33,000 to $39,000. Was that about right?
Yes, and it comes, all of that evidently goes into the general fund. And so that's something that Jenny has been communicating with us in that way. Yeah.
Greg, you have something to add about the dredging of the pond?
Sure, just the timing of that is still to be determined. We've been talking with Lou's been great with this. He's been working with DEC as well as SUNY Cobleskill to try to organize some volunteer help from SUNY Cobleskill and their students. Obviously, with COVID, they're not able to do any field trips such as what would be required to help out Hodges Pond. If we're able to organize enough volunteers in the community to be able to relocate the fish this fall, then we might be able to go forward either this winter or early next spring using TPW forces and equipment and some rented equipment at a relatively low cost. It won't be a full contracting job, Len, to dredge. If we can't do it this winter, we'll probably shoot for next fall. I think doing it all in the spring might get difficult given other priorities with DPW once the weather turns nice enough to do things outside. So it's probably going to be either this fall and winter or next, but still to be determined. And we'll have a full cost estimate put together before we embark on that, but it wouldn't be a huge cost.
Greg, I can circle back with you, but approximately how many volunteers do you need? I mean, is this something that we need adults for? Is this something that maybe the local Troop 23 Boy Scouts could do something like this?
I'm not sure how many exactly. That's what we're working with DEC and assuming Cobblesville. I'm the professor from Cobblesville and the DEC officer. So we can get back to you with that if we're in need of more volunteers. Certainly, I'm sure we can work together to find some people that are willing to help.
Yeah, I can circle back with you, or you can get a hold of me and we'll move forward on that.
Okay.
If there's nothing else, thank you. Before we move on to committee reports, just two things I want to add. One, I know Vince Fodi did let me know about he will be retiring and stepping down from the Parks and Rec Commission. He's a long-serving member of that commission. Also, I just want to take this moment to thank Vince Fodi and hope he enjoys his retirement. He has been a true good friend to the city of Oneonta in many, many ways for many, many years. So well-deserved retirement, and we appreciate all he's done. So I'm sure he's not listening tonight, but thank you, Vince. The other thing is, while we're talking about park boards and commissions, one of the other things that came up during the control group meeting was one of the SUNY students stated that while she was looking at the recording of one of the past control group meetings, she noticed on the city's YouTube page the recordings of some of our board and commission meetings, and she decided to watch them. And she was so impressed with them, she felt like she would love to be on one of them. And she said she's sure there are other students who would like to be on one of them. So we discussed that, and it seems like a great opportunity to have make a ex officio spot on each of our boards and commissions for a college student. And there seems to be interest amongst the students on that. And it just seemed like a great idea in terms of integrating our students into the community in every way, a win-win for everybody. So this young lady is going to put out the word on college and see what students are interested in the different boards and commissions. And we'll make arrangements for them to participate as a non-voting member in one person on each of the board and commission. So I think it's a great idea. All right, let's go to committee reports. The Planning Committee, Councilmember Risberger.
Yes, thank you. We met on September 28th, and we had a few items for discussion. The first one, which is on tonight's agenda, is the zombie property land bank presentation. This was by Judy Bangman, and I believe his name was Hans Morski. I apologize if I'm pronouncing that incorrectly, Judy. The city of Oneonta is a co-applicant for a grant with the town of Herkimer, where we can receive some benefit of their grant, and it's a regional grant of 4 counties. The primary goal is to collect data. The software used will map homes and data and will assist local municipalities in developing strategies and dealing with problem properties. Once the data is mapped, it can then be provided to the municipalities. So what's on the agenda tonight is to allow the mayor to sign off on the agreement with Herkimer. Another item that's on tonight's agenda is the records retention schedule. There are rules regarding how to maintain vital records for the city. This has not been updated since the 1970s, which is actually surprising that the state hasn't done this. So we will be adopting a new records retention schedule via resolution. Parking regulations was a big discussion. This was brought forward by Councilwoman Lepari-Shu. Discussion took place regarding citywide parking, how to best coordinate street cleaning, snow removal with parking regulations, and whether or not to consider resident parking permits. Additionally, we learned that the city currently has one street sweeper. The second one is broken. And the street sweeper takes 2 weeks to clean the city streets one time, partially due to staffing levels. So the action that we took is the committee is admitting that although we have had a parking study completed within the last 5 years, it was really considering parking levels and locations and did not include the impact of coordinating parking with street cleaning, or the impact of including a residential parking permit. So the city staff's going to research available and appropriate parking consultants that may provide guidance on the best way forward. We're going to see what that may cost or may not cost the city before we decide to go forward with that. But obviously, there's no one on the city council that's a parking guru. So we would need some outside direction to be the most efficient with whatever we decide to do. And then the last item, we had a brief discussion about economic development within the city and which direction we wanted to go. Where we really left it was, and I'll also take this opportunity to remind my fellow committee members, we decided to compile a few questions that we wanted to ask some other groups, such as the Southern Tier 8, Mohawk Valley Edge. There's a few other ones that we're going to contact to see what do they do in their region to work on economic development. And I think this is a first step, working with Judy, with her help, and seeing if there's any pieces to the puzzle here that we want to work on to improve the business outlook in our area. So, and that's all I have.
Questions from anyone? Okay, thank you. And Finance Human Resources Committee, Councilmember Carson, please.
Thank you, Mayor. We met September 28th, and the outcome for that meeting are motions 5 through 14 before you. There's a couple of motions that I just wanted to make acknowledgments to, and that would be motion number 7, where the Oneonta Police Sergeants Association came forward showing leadership and asking for a 1-year extension with the current agreement that they already have. I thought that showed true leadership, and I appreciate that from them. I also wanted to thank David Hoteling for successfully negotiating motions 10, 11, and 12. Also, David was integral on motion number 12, that if you did not receive, and I'm hoping everybody's receiving the minutes from Jenny, our finance officer, that on that particular motion, 80% of that was funded by the CARES funding. So I just want to give acknowledgement that David and Jenny did well in receiving 80% of that. But at this time, I'll take any questions.
Okay, if there are none, thank you very much. Okay, next on the agenda is we're going to have a council discussion on the issue of whether or not we want to pursue the hiring of an interim city manager. I'm going to just say a very few words and then turn it over to council discussion. I will say that I'm having a little trouble understanding the justification for this, and I know we have some council members who are advocating for it. So, I will certainly listen and look to learn what the justification is. My concerns are the following. One, Jenny has identified as of last week that we are looking at a deficit in 2020, this year, of as much as possibly $1 million, a minimum of looks like 700,000 up to $1 million. That means that's money that has to come out of reserves this year, not talking about next year. Anything that we spend this year that is not absolutely needed will have to come out of reserves. So, that is one thing that gives me some, pause on this. My second concern is that back in February, before COVID hit, the council said that they wanted to hear the input from the department heads regarding what to look for in the next city manager. The department heads met, they presented a 2-page document to the council. I thought it was well written and well thought out, presenting primarily what they felt were the key qualifications and strengths that they wanted to see in the next city manager. But the one thing that that struck me was the one thing emphasized more than anything else was that they unanimously felt very strongly and requested, and actually it was more of a plea, not to hire an outside interim city manager because it's another transition. And believe it or not, we've been through, I think it's 7 or 8 transitions in the last 10 years in this position. And the department head's feeling was that everyone is a bit of a setback. And if we don't have to add an extra transition, please not. So, you know, given those 2 concerns that one, we'd have to pay for this out of reserves. 2, we took the time to ask the department heads. The most important thing to them was not to have an extra transition. You know, I lean towards not seeing justification for bringing in an interim at this time. I think it's been widely acknowledged by our staff and our council and the public as well that during the last 8 months, our staff have functioned at a very high level, given that they've had to reinvent the entire city government and find new ways of doing things, and really haven't missed a beat in terms of providing services. So I guess my question is, why spend money we don't have trying to fix something that isn't broken? I would look towards moving as quickly as we can to filling the position of city manager, defining what we need, and moving as quickly as we can to fill it, and put our reserves and resources to better use. That's my take on it, but I will now step back and open it up for discussion. Let's just, if you could just raise your hand so we don't have people talking over each other, I'll call on people, that'd be great. Well, that was a quick discussion. Len, go ahead.
Wow. I'm trying to sit back and let anybody else go first. So the reason why I've asked us and Gary was gracious enough to put this on the agenda for tonight was discussion of an interim is because of the timeline. I don't disagree with the mayor with the financial outlook of the city, but with our city charter, no matter whether it's an interim or we actually go out and hire a city manager, or as some of the discussions that have been for the last 7-8 months, whether we switch over to having a city administrator, that we're going to have to pay that no matter what. I do completely agree with them that if whatever we decide to do, that we would move expeditiously towards that. But the question is whether or not we can fulfill this in a timely manner. So I guess I turn to the group and say, how long do you think it would take for us to move forward in hiring the next professional to run our city, whether it's a city manager or a city administrator? So I would ask you to think about that as we're going around the room discussing the pros and cons tonight about the city or the interim city manager position.
Okay, I don't know what silence means. Let me, I guess, is there anyone who wants to speak out in favor of pursuing an interim city manager at this time, bringing in an outside interim? Dave Risberger?
Yeah, well, Len and I spoke a while ago about this, and for me, it really comes down to, as Len was talking about, the timeline. And if we're talking 6, 8, 10, 12 months going forward, before we're looking to hire anyone, because obviously we're going on 8 months, 9 months now without one. I would be in favor of looking into an interim. But if we're looking to get our nose to the grindstone, we already really discussed back in February what we wanted to have as a job description. If we have that ready to go, and we can start doing a search now, I would say I would be willing to hold off on the interim. But if we're going to have a long, drawn out discussion from here on, I would want to look at somebody that could help keep all the arrows going in the same direction. But I also thinking about what the city department heads were what their concerns are. I understand that, and I'm wondering what we have locally as far as managers that would be able to temporarily step in to help out. But it really comes down to, well, what's the timeline?
Len, I'll do my best to answer your question. Based upon my experience and how long would it take, if we get right on this, I would say the quickest we would complete a hire realistically would be 3 months, end of the year. You never know what obstacles you run into. I would hope it would not take more than a maximum of 6 months, given whatever obstacles you run into. If it goes 6 months, that's probably $50,000 that you got to spend out of reserves to cover that period of time with an interim. Mark Drenick.
Yeah, I'd be inclined. I agree with Dave Risberger. I think I do anyway. Dave, moving on this as not interim, but rather beginning the search for a city manager, and doing that without any delay. It's likely to, with the coronavirus and all the implications of that, it's likely to slow the process down anyway, frankly. So if we are able to just begin to work on identifying what we're asking for, beginning the solicitation of that, going through the process, we might find ourselves somebody who would be an appropriate person for this position in 3 months, 4 months, 5 months, whatever it may be, and then have somebody to move forward with. I also agree with the mayor that it doesn't seem to be broken right now. We're committed certainly to a city manager or a position that's similar to that. Maybe it's city administrator, but the charter is pretty clear. That's our charge. And so we, I think, have an obligation to move forward with that. But I don't like, frankly, the idea of muddying the process by having an interim and then, which frankly would require the same expectations being delineated. What do we want from an interim? Let's just do the work and begin the process of the search and identification of the city manager. And if it takes 3 months, 4 months, 5 months, whatever it takes, let's get somebody who'll be here for a good long time and doesn't, give the city staff, concern for the fact that there's going to be a continuing transition.
John Rafter. I think you're muted, John. John, muted.
All right. I will be channeling Daffy Duck because of my tongue. But I think preceding search for a city manager or more of an administrator type of position, that we should have a real discussion in the council about where we would like to end up between those two possibilities. I am not in favor of an interim. I'm not even sure I'm in favor of a city manager. The idea of having someone here for a good long time, we have not been successful with that over the last 10 years. To have anyone be satisfyingly served at the city, with two resigning, well, two being terminated, one resigning with a sense of dissatisfaction. And I kind of asked the council whether we think we can be successful when 2 or 3 previous councils have not been in finding someone successful. And in part of this, I think that if we were be talking about city manager versus city administrator, it would be wise of us to get some agreements about what kind of outcome we'd like to have. Do we want to have a city manager? Do we want to have a city administrator who's in a different sort of capacity? And possibly avoid a fourth problem with the city manager somewhere in the tenure of the next one. That I'm just going to leave it at that. I don't think we've been successful with the city manager in the last 3 tries. There's the adage of fool me once, fool me twice. And do we really think we'll get something else that will be better? Also, rather than having the discussion about the job responsibilities of the city manager, I'd like to have a very clearer discussion about what the outcomes are, i.e. what good are they? We have been doing quite well in a very difficult time. Now, perhaps that's because it was a difficult time and people rose to the occasion. But I do think that doing something that would place less faith in a hypothetical, that is, city manager who's competent and can deliver. What do we want them to deliver, rather than what their responsibilities are? But what good are they? What would you like to see them produce? And I have, in the last few years, in the last couple city managers, not seen a clear understanding in the council about what they produced. What are the outcomes that they gather? We can have and I'm not going to put my faith in a messianic figure who's going to come in and do a better job than the others have done. And that's where I'm kind of coming from with it. So that's my 2 cents.
Okay. Katie had her hand up. Before Katie starts, John, I just want to say all good discussion points, but let's stay focused on the question at hand first, which is, do we want to go for an interim or not? Before we jump into those important issues that you brought up.
I think I've said it, Ben. I'm opposed to an interim.
Okay, thanks. Katie?
Yeah, so I was sort of tailing on what Mark Drenick said. I think that he made some points that I really agreed with. I think for me, I remember what it was, that, in selecting an interim is going to require a similar process to selecting someone to fill the position for good. And so I think that it would behoove us to just put our nose to the grindstone. So, it's been months and months, and what I would really like to come out of this conversation is whether or not we decide on an interim city manager as a group. I would like to come away with this with a clear strategy and dates for meetings, and an expected outcome from those meetings. I think that we really owe it to ourselves to know what the next step is. I think, yeah, I don't want to speak for everyone, but for me, it's been sort of, I feel like we've had our running shoes on, we've been lacing them up, and nobody's pulling the trigger. So if we could just outline what the process looks like from here so that we're all very clear on that, and keep the conversation moving forward with clear expectations, I think that that would be the best move for the council from here. So that's my piece. Thank you.
Thank you. Mark Davies?
Thanks, Mayor. Since we brought this up some time ago, I've been thinking about this a lot, the idea whether we should go the route of an interim or not. And I've really given a lot of consideration from both perspectives. And I think what I settle out on is, and this has been stated, Katie most recently and Mark earlier, but the time that we would spend investing in a search for an interim, I'd rather us invest in a search for a city manager or administrator. And I also feel as though that conversation needs to be had, and it certainly could be a long conversation or it could be a quick conversation. I think we need to move this forward very quickly. I think I'd rather have that conversation first and think about whether we want a manager or administrator and then begin to search, rather than hiring an interim city manager and then having a conversation and moving forward with the search. So I think that the best way forward is to have this conversation quickly, and then begin to, as Katie said, have our very clear strategy in mind and a timeline in mind that we're going to push forward and make these decisions. I'm not in favor of this taking 6 months. I definitely would get concerned if it takes more than 6 months. We've been leaning on our department heads for quite a long time. They've done admirably well, and probably one of the most difficult times that this city has faced. I think that should go with recognition, but I think we owe it to them to try to find the right person and install that right person quickly. And then lastly, I also want to honor what they said to us. They weren't in favor of an interim city manager. They weren't inclined to want to have a transition to a new person, to have to deal with somebody else walking in and running things the way they wanted to, and then transitioning to somebody else. I think we need to honor that. And I think we have a responsibility now to try to move this forward quickly. Thanks.
Len, go ahead. Len, you're muted.
So is the first question we need to answer is whether or not we want a city manager or a city administrator? Is that the first question we should answer?
Well, I think the first question was, do we want to go after an interim? If we're saying no to the interim, then the very next question is, let's define exactly what we're looking for. That would be the next question.
Right. The interim gives us breathing room, which when we started this process back in the beginning of the year, 7, 8, 9 months ago, whatever it was, you advised us this is probably going to be one of the largest decisions, most important decisions this council makes. And I agree. And so we don't want to rush into this. But since then, it's been brought up that maybe we should be looking at a city administrator, given the culture and the history of what's happened in previous administrations. So I've heard it again tonight. I know I've heard it throughout the year of whether or not we're looking at hiring a new city manager or we're hiring a city administrator. So that interim would give us the breathing room. Either way, we're looking at several months. And so I guess I turn back, Gary, you said that if all went well with not knowing how many speed bumps we might get into, it would be at least 3 months. I personally have never done this before, so I'm not even going to fathom other than I've tried to lay it out. And I've talked to a few of you council members privately about this, is that I see it more of 4 to 5 months. And so that's what I put back to the group, is that the timeline. And so if we hire an interim city manager, it'll give us that breathing room that we all need. So, I mean, if we can quickly answer whether we want to hire another city manager or we want to move forward to a city administrator, then that'll squeeze the timeline down.
Well, I would propose that our next meeting, the agenda would be to make a decision on defining what the council's looking for. Come prepared with that, have enough materials to review in advance so that there could be prepared an adequate discussion and hopefully a decision. We shouldn't have to drag this on forever. I would hope we could have next meeting and make a decision one way or the other, or exactly what we're looking for in terms of both what John Rafter said, not only responsibilities and job description, but also what are our expectations in terms of accomplishments, because that also defines what you're looking for. Dave Risberger?
Yeah, Gary, I would agree. Actually, I'm agreeing with just about everything everybody's saying. Katie was talking about a timeline, and I feel strongly if we're not going to go with an interim, I want to have a very clearly defined timeline here. If we're going to go longer than 6 months, I would agree with Len. I'd want an interim. But if we think we can get this done 3 to 6 months, I think I'd be fine with letting things continue on the way they are. But if we're going to have our next meeting discussing whether we want a city manager or a city administrator, which my own opinion, I think that should have been the first question to be answered. But if we're going to discuss that at the next meeting, I'd like to set that meeting date tonight, and maybe either have a special meeting or attach it even onto the budget meeting next week if we think we can do it.
Luke?
Dave took the words right out of my mouth. I would really like to do that, and I would even suggest what might help us prepare a little bit before the meeting is to do something similar to what we did back in February or early March, was to get into our cohorts and really kind of at least start to hammer out what we're thinking and kind of get a coherent idea of what we want: city manager, city administrator, responsibilities, role, outcomes, as John was saying, is what I would propose as well, in addition to what Dave was saying.
Anybody else? Dave?
I appreciate what Luke's saying. Luke, the only question I would have is that might drag this out a little bit more. If everybody wants to do that, I'm willing to, but I'm also willing to just get together as a group and hammer this out and decide what we want to do. We put a lot of work in back in February. We just didn't do anything with it.
That's good.
Just my thought, anyway.
Mark Jonick?
Yeah, so I agree. I think if we determine a timeline and we set ourselves some benchmarks and goals for that timeline, then we'll get to where we need to get, and hopefully, we find ourselves somebody in place in the timeline that makes sense to everybody. So I wouldn't have a lot of meetings. I would, I really look to see if we can have, based on a timeline, what do we want to have accomplished in a meeting, and when do we want to have that meeting, and then move forward from that with an action item that drives the next meeting.
Okay, so I think, I don't know if there's consensus, but I think that the majority is leaning towards moving forward as quickly as possible at this point to fill the position. Next step is to better define the position. There's a desire to have a meeting scheduled to accomplish that as quickly as possible. I'm looking at the schedule, and this week is pretty much booked up. Next week is pretty much booked up. It was suggested to tack it on to the budget meeting. That's possible. It's a lot. Or tack it on to the council meeting the following week. Or if you want to have a totally separate meeting, it looks like the day after the council meeting, next council meeting would be available. So whatever the group favors. Len?
So again, I don't want to beat a dead horse, but this is my point, is in a timeline. So we're struggling to get a date to have a discussion, which that's what tonight was supposed to be. So as a group, Gary has given us the ability to openly communicate tonight. So I guess I'm showing a little frustration is that we're looking at 2 weeks before we set our first meeting to have the first discussion on whether we want a city manager or a city administrator. And so I look at this timeline, and again, I openly admit I've never hired a city manager before. I just don't see where we're going to get this done in 3 months.
Well, you know, the other side of that, Len, is it can take you 3 months to hire an interim. So, but there's no way of predicting. You know, I've been involved in dozens of these types of searches. Sometimes they go smooth as silk. Sometimes they don't. They're really impossible to predict. I think that 3 months is possible, but is optimistic. I think barring real problems, it should be accomplished between 3 and 6 months. But you can never promise anything on these because, you know, the other thing is sometimes you go through a perfect search, you offer the position and the person doesn't accept, and you start all over again. So, you know, there are always, you know, unpredictables. But I think saying 3 months minimum, barring really unforeseen circumstances, 6 months maximum is a reasonable estimate of what we can expect.
So Gary, if you don't mind, so I turn to the council and say, that's the timeline. From Gary, who's done this several times, he's estimating between 3 to 6 months to do this. From whether we're hiring a city manager or a city administrator, 3 to 6 months. And so are you guys comfortable asking our department heads to continue in the positions that they've already been doing for the last, David, what's the math, 8, 9 months, for another possible 6 more months? So for me, that's the question right now.
Katie?
Yeah, I would just answer Len's question directly. I think that if we can save the city taxpayers and the reserves that cost by simply being efficient and purposeful and holding ourselves accountable to a timeline, I think we owe that to our department heads. In that way, we honor their request of not having an additional change. We respect our taxpayers by not putting out, you know, additional funds that don't need to be spent. And we respect the work that everyone has been doing here at City Hall by taking this seriously, getting our butts in gear. I think that hiring an interim, the way I perceive your reasoning and your statement is that it kind of gives us the permission to relax a little bit. And I think that's the opposite of what we should be doing. So while I see your point, I don't think that's the way forward. So thank you.
Okay. Dave Risberger.
Yeah, I just want to add, I think whether we decide to meet next week or the week of the next council meeting, I mean, I would prefer next week. Nobody said this job was going to be easy or that we were going to get lots of sleep for 4 years. But I don't see why we can't come out of one meeting, knowing whether we want a manager or an administrator. We did a significant amount of work back in February, and we just need to get the two groups together and decide, look at what we had, what we wanted, what the description was. And as Mark Drenick was saying, take a look at the relationship that we want the person to have with the council and decide what we want. So I can see us getting that. We should get that done in one meeting. I don't see why we have to let that drag on. And then once we know what we want, then we can move forward. And Len, in my experience, a lot of the time it's a lot of waiting. Once you put the postings out, is just waiting for people to send in resumes and so on, and then going through them and eliminating the ones that don't fit, and setting up meetings with the ones that do. And then, as Gary said, I mean, it did happen one time where we had a failed search and we had to start it over. So it does happen, but let's hope it doesn't.
And Gary, if you don't mind, one more point of clarification. So if we do move over to a city administrator, can Dave Merzig answer the question of whether we would have to have a public referendum because it's regarding a change into the city charter?
The simple answer to that is no. As long as we don't change the authority, the current, well, you can read the charter. The charter does not grant any authority that wouldn't be the same authority that would be needed to be handled by the administrator. So as long as you didn't change, as long as you didn't change you didn't remove the powers of the city manager, it would still be okay. If you decided that you wanted to redefine the charter and change the charter with regard to the provisions that it grants to the dedicated city manager person, then you would have to. But I don't think that's the plan. But well, again, read the charter, see what it says. If you withhold powers that are granted to the city manager in the charter, then you would have to change it. There would have to be a referendum, but if you don't, then you don't. I don't know if that answers your question, but
No, it does, David, because it also kicks out that timeline again. And so, Katie, I heard what you're saying, but reality is we don't know how this is all going to shake out. And so it's not about relaxing to the point of slowing the process down. It was being able to have these open discussions, because I think the timeline's going to get kicked out.
Mark Trenick?
So I wonder if we might be able to agree on a time where we could discuss the nature of the city manager or city administrator's job sooner than a couple of weeks from now. And if we can figure that out while we're having this discussion, maybe we can do that either on the other half. I'm perfectly fine with having a meeting whenever, or adding on to that financial meeting, whatever needs to be. But I think it is important that we move it along and maybe not tie up another council meeting with the discussion. We don't know what's going to wind up being on the agenda for that. And we want to have maybe our heads totally in the game, just to discuss this and get this done.
Okay, I'm looking at the calendar for next week. Monday's a holiday. Tuesday are committee meetings. Thursday is the budget meeting. I don't have anything on my calendar for Wednesday evening, the 14th.
I can't on the 14th.
Okay, that's right. You have something. So, I would be, for the sake of a couple of days, tacking it onto the budget meeting, I would be hesitant to do that, because the budget meeting, my understanding is you're going to get a first draft of the budget on the budget meeting. I think there's going to be a lot to digest and discuss. Tacking two big subjects together, I'm not quite sure everybody's going to feel they'll be at their best. If we look at the following, there's Friday, if people want to meet on a Friday, that's open.
I'd be willing to meet on a Friday.
This
Not like I can go
Friday?
anywhere.
Friday the 16th.
Is there some sort of rule that we can't meet on a holiday?
I don't think there's a rule that we can't meet on a holiday.
Okay.
We don't
Columbus
typically meet on holidays, but no, I don't think there's any rule against it. Is that something that people want, is to meet on Monday night?
I would meet on Monday night. We're Zooming, so.
Yeah, I could do that as well.
Me too.
It's okay with me.
as
Um,
well.
Great.
Well, if we're going to meet on Monday night, the other option is to leave the committee meetings in their normal time and hold this meeting on Tuesday night instead of moving the committee meetings. Because we're moving the committee meetings away, not to meet on a holiday. But I don't, unless somebody sees a problem one way or the other, I don't.
Just
Gary,
speaking,
we have to post ahead of time that we're having a meeting. If we had it Monday, would that be enough time?
Yeah, I think if it's a special meeting, you just need 1 day's notice.
Okay.
Is that correct, David?
It's supposed to be 72 hours, but you have 72 hours anyway.
So if you want to meet on Ginny,
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to remind you that we have Waterworth scheduled for the 13th already, and I'm not sure if he'll be available for Monday if you switch the finance meeting.
okay, thanks for pointing that out. That's helpful. All right, so it looks like it's Monday. Monday at 7 o'clock. I will do my best in gathering some reading materials and preparation and put together a bit of an agenda, very simple to guide the discussion. And we'll plan it for Monday at 7 o'clock. Okay, very good. Okay, with that, we will now go to, if I can find my, Dr. Jorgensen, your report.
I'm still here, and I want to say you're all working incredibly hard, and I appreciate you. So that being said, I'm going to try to share my screen here, see if it works. Are you seeing my slide?
Yep.
All right, you're seeing my slide, you're hearing my voice?
Yes.
Great. So I thought this would just give us a few visuals as I give you a very brief overview, beginning with our global situation now, as of today, by the World Health Organization's chart you see in front of you. There have been over 35 million confirmed cases of COVID-19 and over 1 million deaths. I wanted to show the graphics so you can see that, I think your pictures are to the side. But anyway, the bars are week intervals, and basically there's still about the same number of new cases on a daily and a weekly basis. It's not slowing in any way. The number of deaths are also staying fairly stable. Here in the United States, this epi curve shows that, and again, on my screen now, it's showing all the participants, so you're not seeing the right hand of the screen. Is that how it's showing for you?
Yeah, but you can move that, Diane.
Well, this may be too technical for me because
You just grab the window and move it over.
Whoops. See,
You can move everybody out of the way.
it's hard to explain this, but my mouse doesn't work.
Oh.
Diane, can I ask you a question while we're on this graphic?
Of course.
I don't know if you're in a position to say this, but we've been hearing reports about, particularly out in the Midwest, in the mountain states, where they're seeing a pretty massive spike in cases. Is it possible, or are you in a position to say that we're possibly? It almost looks like there was a trough and it's starting to go up a little bit. Is it possible that this is another wave we could potentially be looking at?
Well, I think if you listen, from what I understand, listening to the experts, primarily Dr. Fauci, is that this really isn't, the big peak we saw in August really wasn't technically a second wave because we never really out of the first. But what we are seeing are some trends toward increased cases. And yes, in terms of the United States, the number of new cases per day and per week has been about level the last few weeks. State to state, it's going to vary. The states with the largest numbers, those being California, Texas, Florida, all those numbers are trending down. Whereas, again, cases in the Midwest, Alaska, and here in the Northeast are starting to trend back up. So overall, cases in the United States are trending about the same. And I apologize, I can't move the graph over to show you the right-hand side.
That's okay.
Does that answer your question, Luke?
It does. Thank you very much. Yep.
Okay, so again, in the United States, over 7 million cases, over 200,000 deaths. Here in New York State, now this graph is from the New York State Department of Health. In the blue are the number of total cases. So a lot of, I think this graph is to impress upon you all the testing that's being done. And the little yellow below is those positive tests. So that overall, we're running, about 1% positivity. Now, that being said, the number of positive cases per day has been starting to trend up. For weeks and weeks this summer, it was around 600 to 900. The last week or so, it's been over 1,000. So I got this other slide. This is from Johns Hopkins. This kind of shows you that a little more graphically. You see how the cases in the last few weeks in New York are trending a little bit upward. And I'm not sure if that's going to continue. What Cuomo's saying is that a few hotspots, primarily in Queens, Brooklyn, Rockland, other downstate counties are accounting for this upward trend, that they're staying on top of these hotspots, that they're, doing, closing things down and trying again to keep us from continue going upward in New York State, but time will tell. Here in Otsego County, oh, now we're really off a little. This is from yesterday. Since that time, late this afternoon, they have reported 2 more cases, but this is still fairly current. There, in the last 2 days, were 13 new cases reported. 2 cases from the 4th, 11 yesterday. 6 of those cases were SUNY Oneonta students, 7 county residents. The other 7 county residents, none of them were Oneonta residents. Of the 6 SUNY Oneonta students, they were all off-campus students. So now, including the 2 today, there are a total of 912 confirmed cases. 30 as of today are active, actually. 1 hospitalization, no new deaths. And the county is accounting for 731 cases linked to the SUNY Oneonta outbreak. And there are 20 confirmed cases in Hartwick students.
Dr. Jordan, may I ask I'm so sorry, one more question?
Of course.
So the 7 county residents that are not linked to the college, that seems like, and not to obviously panic or anything, but that does seem higher than it's typically been. Now, my eyes have been recently zoomed in on the city statistics. Is it seem like it's a little bit higher at the county level than it has been?
Yes, that number does represent an increase. What Heidi told me this morning is they're following, and it's on their Facebook release from today. There was a wedding outside of the county where they've had a cluster of cases. So that's accounting for some of those. But I think, I think it could be trending up countywide as well. Last week there were 3 Bassett employees that tested positive. And I think the message I want to convey, I wish I could move this. Wait a sec. I'm just going to do something to see if my mouse is going to work here.
Looks like we lost her altogether.
Diane, I think your mouse ate you up and swallowed you.
She's correct. She's not techie at all.
He's gone.
Okay.
There she
Is she
is.
back? Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
You're muted now, Diane.
You're still muted, Diane.
All right, can you hear me now?
Yes.
All right, let's get back here. Back to here. Now, this will work. Can you see it? Yes. Okay, so this slide, this is thanks to Mark Drenick, a big thanks, because he's the one that was able to, Heidi, who works very hard, the director of the county health department, was able to provide us with Oneonta specific numbers since the beginning of the outbreak. So this is a bar graph I made that incorporates that data. And you can see, and this is kind of what I wanted to show you. And again, this is just positive cases in the city of Oneonta. Now, there are times in here where there are no cases, and part of that's because sometimes they don't report every day. They, like, for instance, yesterday or today they reported 6 cases from the days before. But in any event, what I want you to see is we still have this low level of cases in the city of Oneonta. The majority of those cases are our off-campus students. And the point I'm trying to make is I think we need to continue to be quite vigilant about all of our measures, which include masking, social distancing, and all of that, because I think there's still some evidence we have active disease in the community. I did hear from Barbara Morris today. One of my concerns in looking at this and understanding that we're still seeing new cases of off-campus students are, how are those kids doing? So a couple of things Barbara shared with me. They on campus are doing, again, a combination of their pool testing, their traditional molecular testing, as well as finally they got rapid testing. They reported in the last 2 weeks having done 1,127 tests, all of which were negative. That included their on-campus, their few on-campus students, their employees, and 255 off-campus students. So the off-campus students are taking advantage of this elective testing that is being offered on campus, which I found somewhat reassuring. That being said, these 6 students you see over here, those were all tested at well now. So that's why the campus is reporting that they've had no positives. The off-campus students are by and large choosing to get tested off campus. But one thing I learned was that the county, when they identify the case as a student, do report that to the campus. So the campus health center is following up with these students to make sure they have the resources they need. So I was encouraged when I heard that, because part of me was just thinking, are these students simply our responsibility now? The college is remaining somewhat engaged. Now, at this point, before I go on, does anyone have questions about that? Comments?
I do, Diane. I don't know if you can see me. This is David Mercer.
See you.
Is it? I had heard that the other Otsego County positives were all traced to a wedding that had occurred. Is that true, or is that just a rumor?
I'm not sure all, but that's what Heidi Bond told me this morning, that a number of those cases were linked to a wedding which did not occur in the county.
But where county residents were involved.
Yes.
And is it, with the withdrawal of the testing team that was in Oneonta, how do we know that the super low reports in the city are caused by no positive cases, or simply because there's less testing opportunities available to the city residents as a whole?
Well, that's a good question. The testing that was done beginning the first week of September, and then I guess the following week, of those 400 or so tests, no, maybe there was 4 more the first 2 weeks. Heidi told me this morning, estimate 400 tests with 4 positives from our most recent week of testing. She felt fairly confident that given the low numbers, and those numbers were primarily students that were testing positive in the free testing that was offered in the city, that we were not experiencing a significant increase. The other thing in the absence of widespread testing is simply looking for people who are symptomatic. And then that does bring me to this whole concept of our wastewater testing, which I still think may have some value. And Greg, at any point, feel free to chime in here. This is the most recent data we have, I think from September 19th. We haven't heard back recently, but these are graphs put together by our colleagues in Syracuse. And here they're using the county data, showing that big spike at the beginning of September, which was primarily the SUNY outbreak, and then showing gradual decreases to this lower level. You can see the wastewater, it did go up significantly right around the time of the outbreak, and then we had this one blip. But now the important thing is it is coming down, and it is hopefully staying down. So if we continue to follow this, David, if it starts going up again, that may be an indicator that we're seeing more presence in the community.
Yeah, that's kind of like pooling for the community as a whole.
Yes, this represents the whole Oneonta community, including parts of the town, including both college campuses. So it's a very
that's a very good broad mechanism for determining.
Yeah.
Beautiful. That's good.
Now, that being said, Heidi did tell me this week, today, the county has retained those 4 rapid test kits, the rapid test machines, and they still have about 800 test kits. So we're there, and they're holding those in reserve. They're not planning any other test sites in the near future, but they're holding those in reserve in case it looks to be that there's a specific community that needs the kind of testing that occurred when we had those test sites in Oneonta. So I also find that somewhat reassuring. Testing and the availability of testing all along has been a huge issue. And if there's not any questions there, I'll just go on. Just a couple more updates.
Diane.
Yes.
So did I miss the slide? So between the month of September and October, those 2 months, out of all these cases, how many were hospitalized?
In terms of including the student outbreak numbers from September.
I see it now. So there was only 1 hospitalization. Am I reading that correctly? Out of all these cases on this slide, there was 1 hospitalization.
This just reflects currently there is a patient in Cooperstown that's hospitalized. That patient, as far as I know, is not at all related to the SUNY outbreak. There were, according to the health department, as far as they know, none of the positive students or their close contacts were hospitalized. Heidi tells me that she's aware that 4 of the students were diagnosed with pneumonia. A couple went to the emergency rooms for hydration, but were not admitted. Now, the one thing we don't know is that many of the students who tested positive went home. So, and once they go home, our county health department turns over those cases to the local health departments. So it may be that some of those students got sicker and were hospitalized. It may be that they had some close contacts who were sick and hospitalized, but we have no way of knowing that. Does that answer your question, Len?
It does. And then earlier, Diane, you said that SUNY is still remaining somewhat engaged with the off-campus students that if they tested positive. I guess, could you elaborate just a little bit more on that? What does that mean?
So what President Morris told me today in her email correspondence is that when a student tests positive here in the county, say it well now, apparently there's something identifiable that they identify as a student. And when that is the case, the county then informs the campus. So the campus can then reach out to the student.
So
That-
early on, there was mention that Otsego County Public Health would have to quarantine these patients. Is that still happening, or are they self-quarantining? Meaning anybody that tests positive. I'm not looking at any particular demographic.
I'm not sure that the county, somebody else may know this, most people who are advised to isolate or quarantine do so in their own homes. I think the county at one point had planned to have housing available for people who didn't have the capability to do that, but I'm not sure. So for right now, these 32 active cases, how many who they would all have to be in isolation, mandatory isolation. I do not know if any of those are not in their own homes, but in a facility provided by the county. Do you want me to find that out for you?
I find it interesting that they test positive, and I thought I was under the impression that the county was housing somebody, the positive cases somewhere else. I thought that's where that cost came into fact.
Well, I think back when the students were being isolated in the dormitories, I understood that the county was somehow reimbursing the state for that. But
Yeah, that's what I'm getting at. It was like, wasn't it was like $45 a day per individual?
I heard that, yes. Now, there are no students now in isolation in the dormitories on campus. So I don't think that agreement would be existing anymore. Whether or not the county is providing any isolation or quarantine facilities for other people in the community, I don't know, and I can find that out for you.
Thank you.
Any other questions before I move on? So just usually what I provide are just sort of quick updates in the news. In the news today, now this is not really new news, but the CDC has pretty much gone back and forth about the emphasis on the potential spread of or airborne transmission. And so this revised statement on the CDC website just came out yesterday. And this is just a little piece of it, but it does speak to the fact and acknowledge that studies have shown that in addition to the droplets, these small aerosolized particles can linger in the air and perhaps get beyond that 6-foot range that we've all been sort of looking at. And you can read the whole thing on the CDC website, but basically I'm putting this up just to emphasize the CDC is now acknowledging that while the primary mode of transmission is close contact and that droplets to and from the respiratory areas, there is a potential that the virus can survive for longer periods of time in the air. And again, just making it really important to emphasize the importance of mask use, distancing, and especially as we move indoors, looking at the indoor space as being more inherently high risk, and the importance of things like ventilation and ventilatory controls and filters as we, again, transition to the indoors. One final update, the FDA released today its new stricter guidelines for vaccine development. This had been previously blocked by the White House, but apparently it's going forward. What this means is there probably won't be a vaccine available in the next few weeks, but the experts are still optimistic that perhaps even by the end of the year, there will be a vaccine available. Interestingly, New York State, our governor has put together a task force both to review the clinical guidance, clinical advisory task force, and the implementation. So I think our state is very well poised to get the vaccine up and running once it's available. And the last thing I will just say is, given that it's flu season, it's very important we continue our efforts to promote flu vaccination. And that's it. Any questions?
Okay. Thank you, Diane. Just very quick, just to add to that. One of the concerns we are having, as Diane mentioned, is you cannot get a test in Otsego County right now unless you're symptomatic. That's a problem. At least I think that's a problem. And I've discussed that both yesterday and today with the governor's office. They came back to me today and said that they are looking to see what they can do to support increased access to testing in this area, because it should not be that you cannot get an access to a test unless you're symptomatic. That causes a number of problems. Somebody wants to visit their mother or father or a relative in a nursing home, they have to drive to Binghamton to get a test in order to show that they're negative. And it also interferes with tracing, that if we don't know that people are testing positive, then they're not being traced appropriately. So that's an issue I think that needs to be addressed, and I've been talking to the governor's office about that. Secondly, the governor announced today a new approach, given that we're having these hotspots. First of all, there'll be no more continuing opening announcements. We are where we are. There are not going to be any more openings or decrease in numbers of people in gathering. We're staying where we are for the foreseeable future. And that hotspots will be rated yellow, orange, or red. And based upon that rating, they will be scaling back what is permitted, whether it's closing of schools, decreasing sizes of gatherings, decreasing capacity of restaurants, and so forth. The only hotspot that is outside of downstate right now is the Binghamton area, which is yellow, which is the least drastic one. So that's something to be aware of. And finally, I was given a little slap on the wrist today, deservedly so, because in my column, I did not thank Diane for all she has done. And so I want to apologize for that and thank Diane for all she has done over the last 8 months for us. Thank you, Diane.
You are very welcome. It's an honor. You didn't have to put me in the article.
And with that, we'll now go to the COVID work group report. Is that going to be Dave Risberger? Are you going to do that?
Well, Gary, I told everyone before you came on to the meeting, I apologize. All my notes from that meeting, since I was in my office for that meeting, all my notes are at my office. So I would go by Diane's report. If Dave Hotelling has anything to add, or the chief has anything to add. Scott Harrington, I know you were there. If you have anything that you want to add from that meeting. But again, I apologize. I don't remember there anything being out of the ordinary from previous weeks.
I think I pretty much covered most of it. The one thing I recall hearing our police chief say was that there really hadn't been a problem with big, as far as the police were aware, big gatherings and parties amongst the students. Also, I heard the department say that they had enough personal protective equipment. And David, do you remember what you said?
That we're fine with PPE at this time. We got a good supply, and I forwarded all that on to the Katie, Greg, and Chief Pigeon that they needed for FEMA. So we're in good shape.
And Greg, did you want to say anything more about the wastewater?
Sure. I'll just add quickly that we'll continue monitoring that. We should have another sample test result coming back probably tomorrow. I think Diane covered it. I mean, that's sort of our early warning, conceivably of another rise in cases, and also our sort of verification and confidence builder that we're in a decent position now on the downward trend. But again, as Diane said, it's really important to watch the trend in wastewater and not overreact to any one point that's high or low. It's really about the 2-week trend over time. So, thanks, Diane.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you, everybody. I think we can go to the consent agenda. Okay, motion 1, that the council approves the minutes of the regular meeting, which was held September 15th, 2020. Motion 2, the council approves the minutes of the special budget meeting, which was held September 17th, 2020. Motion 3, council approves the minutes of the special meeting, that was the Transit Hub presentation by Wendell, that was held on September 22nd, 2020. 4, motion that the council approves the warrants totaling $971,299.91, and that the same be placed on the Director of Finance's desk for payment as presented. 5, motion that the council increases the base salary for our personnel assistant, David Corey, by $4,000, which brings him to a new base salary of $45,000. This is to compensate him for additional duties, which will be performed, and it becomes effective October 7th, 2020. 6, motion that the council authorizes the finance director to sign the 2021 insurance renewals with Excelis Blue Cross. This is to cover Blue Cross Blue Shield to cover medical and dental coverage for our employees as presented. 7, motion that the council authorizes the mayor to enter into a memorandum of agreement with the City of Oneonta Police Sergeants Association. This is to amend language in Article 7 to remove the requirement that employees move on the salary schedule only one time per year. 8, motion that the council approves the hire of Brian Flory as an engineering/GIS technician. This would be at a base salary of $57,500. It'd be effective October 28th, 2020. It is subject to the satisfaction of all applicable civil service requirements. The council further authorizes Mr. Flory to be credited with 3 weeks of vacation time upon his date of hire, which may be used after he completes 6 months of service to the city. 9, motion that the council authorizes the mayor to sign a 2-year contract with A.O. Fox Memorial Hospital. This would cover January 1, 2021 through December 31st, 2022. It would be to provide continued Oneonta public transit services to the Fox Care facility in the town of Oneonta for a sum of $1,500 annually, subject to review by the city attorney. 10, motion that the council authorizes the mayor to sign a 2-year contract with Arcot Seago covering January 1, 2021 through December 31st, 2022 for the provision of continued services, Oneonta public transit services for $1,500 annually, subject to the review by the city attorney. 11, motion that the council authorizes the mayor to sign a 1-year contract with South Side Mall in the town of Oneonta. This would go from January 1, 2021 through December 31, 2021. This would be for the provision of continued Oneonta public transit services to the South Side Mall in the town of Oneonta for a sum of $6,000 annually, subject to review by the city attorney. 12, motion that the council approves the purchasing agent's recommendation to award the bid for a 2021 Chevrolet Tahoe four-wheel drive to the lowest responsive qualified bidder, which is Capolino Chevrolet of Boston. I'm going to take a guess, and that should be Massachusetts, not New York, with a bid amount of $50,382.92, contingent upon the execution of the Federal Transit Administration's Formula Grants for Rural Area Program, which is known as Section 5311. 13, motion that the council approves the budget transfers and amendment totaling $49,650 per the attached reports. 14, motion that the council approves the amendment of the street work portion of the sanitary main Lower Wilbur Capital Project HC63 in the amount of $26,500. This is for the additional work which was required to meet in order to complete the project, which is to be funded by existing funds within our street capital projects and/or the state CHIPS funding. This amendment will bring the total street portion of the project from $305,000 to $331,500. Excuse me. 15. Motion that the council adopts the ordinance to add chapter 122 to the City of Oneonta Municipal Code, entitled Masks and Face Coverings. This would require social distancing on all public and private indoor and outdoor locations within the city, and the wearing of a mask when not social distance. The ordinance was laid electronically on the desks of the council members on September 16th, 2020. And number 16. The council approves the following resolution. Resolved by the Common Council of the City of Oneonta that the retention and disposition schedule for the New York local government's records issued pursuant to Article 57A of the Arts and Cultural Affairs Law and containing legal minimum retention requirements for local government records is hereby adopted for use by all officers in legally disposing of valueless records listed therein. Further resolved that in accordance with Article 57A, only those records will be disposed of that are described in the retention and disposition schedule for New York local government's records after they have met the minimum retention periods described therein. And B, only those records will be disposed of that do not have sufficient administrative, fiscal, legal, or historical value to merit retention beyond the established legal minimum periods. And motion 17. Motion that the council authorizes the mayor to sign documents on behalf of the City of Oneonta as a co-applicant of the Local Initiatives Support Corporation Zombie 2.0 grant, which includes the grant administration contract between the town of Herkimer and the Greater Mohawk Valley Land Bank. That concludes our consent agenda, and I'll take any requests to remove any of those 17 motions from the consent agenda. Just raise your hand and let me know. Councilmember Lepari Shu.
I'd like to remove 11 and 15, please.
11 and 15.
Yeah, thank you.
All my pens are running out of ink here. Okay, I think Scott Harrington.
Can we pull number 5, please? I just have a
Sure.
question. So.
Sure. All right, so I've got 11, 15, and 5. Any others? Okay, hearing none. I will entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda minus 11, 5, and 15. Councilmember Carson makes the motion. Councilmember Risberger seconds. I will call a vote. Councilmember Murphy.
Aye.
Councilmember Davies.
Aye.
Councilmember Risberger.
Aye.
Councilmember Lepari Shu.
Aye.
Councilmember Carson.
Aye.
Councilmember Harrington.
Aye.
Councilmember Rafter.
Aye.
And Councilmember Drenick.
Aye.
Okay, thank you. The consent agenda passes. Less items 11, 15, and 5. Let's go to item 5. This regards increasing the base salary for the personnel assistant by $4,000. I'll entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
Councilmember Carson, I have a second by Councilmember Risberger. Discussion. Councilmember Harrington.
I apologize. During the finance committee, I was having all sorts of problems with the computer, so this might have been asked then. Is this going to take the place of the stipend that he's already getting, or is the stipend going to still be going along with increasing his base salary?
Go ahead, Katie Bodker.
Yeah, it replaces the stipend, Scott. So the council had awarded a stipend for a 90-day trial in the amount of $8,000. During that 90 days, we evaluated proper staffing and workloads. So we've come back with a recommendation that we think meeting in the middle and providing half of that stipend on a permanent basis for Dave to permanently take over duties of a higher level position would be effective and also save money because again, that's in lieu of hiring a higher accountant level position. So yeah, his stipend expired on September 30th.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate it.
Any further discussion? I'll call the vote. Councilmember Murphy.
Aye.
Councilmember Davies.
Aye.
Councilmember Risberger.
Aye.
Councilmember Lepari Shu.
Aye.
Councilmember Carson.
Aye.
Councilmember Harrington.
Yes.
Councilmember Rafter.
Aye.
Councilmember Drenick.
Aye.
Motion passes. Thank you. We'll now go to motion 11. This regards authorizing me to sign the one-year contract between OPT and the Southside Mall. Do I have a motion to approve? Councilmember Carson, second by Councilmember Lepari Shu. Discussion.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask, I know that during the meeting when this was discussed, it had been mentioned that they were looking at changing the route, not changing the route, but looking at the route and the times that the service was offered and things like that. And so I just wondered if that could be elaborated on a little bit, what that trial period looks like and what they're hoping to accomplish with that.
Calling David Hoteling.
Please and thank you.
David, you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, great.
I didn't hear the first part of her question. Which
Oh.
route are we talking about?
Southside Mall. So I used to work there and with those folks. And so I know that there has always been, some talk among them of employees having a hard time getting out there for work, and the mall being open until 9, but the bus route stops way earlier than that. And I just wondered if those are the types of things that you're looking into, or if there are other considerations that you're making with regard to that route specifically.
I've talked to management at the mall, and we're running the same schedules that we have over the last few years. We haven't expanded the schedule. There was actually a reduction in ridership over there, so we felt that it was, we haven't had any call, so to speak, to expand the route. So we felt it was good to keep it the way it was.
Gotcha. So maybe I misheard then. I heard that, I thought I heard at the meeting that, at the finance meeting where this contract was discussed, that there was some sort of like preliminary, I don't know, change to that, that route specifically, where you were going to be trying out different things. And that was my question.
That was during COVID. In the beginning, we did some different things there. Now we've gone back to the normal route schedule.
Gotcha. Okay. All right. Well, thank you for clarifying.
No problem.
If there's no further discussion on it, I will call the vote on that. Councilmember Murphy.
Aye.
Councilmember Davies.
Aye.
Councilmember Risberger.
Aye.
Councilmember Lepari Shu.
Aye.
Councilmember Carson.
Aye.
Councilmember Harrington.
Yes.
Councilmember Rafter.
Aye.
Councilmember Drenick.
Aye.
Okay, motion passes. All right, I'm getting pretty good at this without having to visualize the room as I go around. All right, now we'll go to motion 15. This is the adopting the ordinance that regarding masks and face coverings. Let me, before I just take a move on it, just clarification. I've had a lot of questions on this, and I think the main questions are around what this covers. So just want to point out once again, this puts no restrictions on the people of the city beyond the restrictions that are currently placed on them by the state of New York. There is nothing in this ordinance that changes what is currently expected and required of the people of the entire state of New York. The only reason for it is that we've been notified by the police chief that enforcing the state public health law is not something that is a simple matter for the police department. This gives them their normal tools to use in enforcing a state law, in enforcing what's already law for the entire state. Do I have a motion to approve? Councilmember Murphy, do I have a second? Councilmember Risberger, discussion. Councilmember Davies.
The proposed mask ordinance was initially raised in committee as an ordinance targeting SUNY Indiana college students living in the city, and with the intent to potentially stop or reduce transmission of the COVID-19 virus to residents through the creation of the ordinance and fining violators. As an employee of SUNY Indiana, I was advised by our ethics officer that I'm required to recuse myself from the discussion and vote on the ordinance. Participation in either discussion or the vote would be a conflict of interest or appear to be a conflict of interest. Okay. Just putting that out there for the record. Thank you.
Thank you. I would ask David Merzig to address any perception that this targets any individual group. I think it's important to address that perception.
Yeah, obviously, the purpose of the statute is to simply implement, as you stated earlier, Mayor, the purpose is to implement the state law, the Department of Health regulations that were generated as a result of the executive order of the governor. It's exactly the same and would apply to everyone equally. I disagree with the representation that it's targeted at students. It's something that's already in effect statewide and is expected to be followed by all citizens. I hope that answers your question, Mayor.
Thank you. I think it was important to clarify that. Councilmember Lepari-Shu.
Yeah, I'm just gonna kind of piggyback on that. Since I was the person who proposed the legislation, I can see how that perception came to be, because I had initially, the intent of the legislation that I had proposed was to regulate densely populated areas, such as my own. And I do have a high density of student rentals in my neighborhood, so I can absolutely see where that came from. But yeah, to Dave Merzig's point, I think that we got to a place where, this is really about making sure that folks know that the city of Oneonta takes our safety measures seriously. Yeah, to quote our city health officer, I think it's important that we remain quite vigilant about the safety measures. With that being said, I'm not 100%, thrilled with where we ended up as a result of compromise through that discussion. I don't feel that this legislation entirely protects folks in densely populated neighborhoods in the way, like I said, that I had intended. I do wish that we had been able to come up with something with more focus in the downtown and the center city neighborhoods. But with that being said, here we are, and I think that it's really important that we continue to take measures to keep our community safe. And I think that there is nothing wrong with codifying and adopting state legislation in a way that allows our police force to use this as a tool to be able to do just that. So I would love to hear the thoughts of other council members who live in the higher density neighborhoods as well, and what they think this legislation will do for their neighborhoods. But I will say that I've heard from my constituents only positive things about this legislation. So I would just put that out there. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Before I call on Luke, just to, in asking for discussion about those who represent the higher density neighborhoods, the center city wards are not considered high density. They're the R2 primarily, which are medium density. Our higher density neighborhoods are the R3s and R4s, which are not the center city. So, just to recognize that.
Sure. I mean, there's 20 feet between my house and my neighbors is what I meant. I think where we draw that line is maybe arbitrary, because I think, so today I left the house with my toddler without a mask, kind of impromptu, and that was a mistake. I had a hard time avoiding people. We were crossing the street a lot, and it can be done. But I think that, I see so many people walking down my street on an average day, 24 hours a day. There are a lot of people. And that's not true in other areas of the city. And so that's that's where I'm coming from.
Mhm.
That, you know, I think we can really delineate where there are places you can go for fresh air and where there are places, you know, where keeping the people around you safe is important and harder to do without a mask, is my point.
Okay.
Thank you.
Good. Councilmember Murphy?
Yes, I would just like to speak in support of this. Even though First Ward is not Center City, even 2 days ago, I had an interaction where, thankfully we're both wearing masks, but Main Street is busy. And we were both on the same side of the street. And unless we went onto somebody's lawn, there was no way we were getting 6 feet of distance. And a lot of people do walk on Main Street. But I think this is absolutely mandatory, and I think it's in the greater good of the city. This week has made abundantly clear even the most powerful among us with the best healthcare can't escape this virus. So doing everything and anything we can do to keep our city safe, I think is the right way to go.
Anybody else have any discussion on it? Councilmember Harrington?
I have a question first. When we were discussing this, and I can't remember if the discussion was right, but doesn't our codes department already have the ability to enforce this? Because this came from the New York State Department of Health, correct?
This is a public health law. It currently exists as a public health law, correct?
Right. That was still the powers was for enforcement was given to the codes department, correct?
Well, I don't want to speak for the codes office here, but my understanding is that our codes office is equipped to enforce the public health law as it applies to properties. They're not staffed or equipped or focused or trained in enforcing laws that applies to individuals walking down the street.
Okay. But it still can be enforced by the codes department, correct?
I don't know if I can answer that question. David, can you?
Yes, they have the legal authority to do it, but we don't have tickets. We don't treat them as law enforcement officers with regard to individuals who are walking down the street, as you said. They expressed their concern that they were not trained to do that. They didn't have the facilities. They didn't have tickets in order to enforce the provisions of the health law as regard to this statute, and which is why the police were granted the authority to do it, or will be granted the authority assuming this passes.
Okay. I'm just gonna say I went around my community here and I've asked about 30 people, and out of that, more are not in favor of it than they are in favor of it. And it's not even close. I think it was like 4 to 30. 4 that were for it, 30 that were against it. So this is like one of those ones in January. All I remember, Gary, is in January when you looked at all of us and said, at some point, we're not going to all be smiling together. We're going to be on opposite sides. And you didn't think I was listening to you. But, this is a complicated vote. And, and I go back to how it came and was originated on YouTube. I keep watching the video. And I understand the importance of wearing a mask and stuff. I mean, I drilled into my kids' heads trying to get them ready to go back to school, that they have to have it on everywhere we go. So, but I just wanted to put that out there that a lot of people think this is an overreach. They think it's something that we don't need. They feel that they're adults. They know what the guidelines are, and they feel that they don't need to be treated like, anything else other than adults. So I'm just telling you what I've heard and the feedback that I've gotten. I just wanted to put it out there so that everybody had a chance to hear what I was hearing.
Councilmember Lepari Shu had her hand up first.
I was just gonna say, I think that Scott really illustrates my point, which is that, where we have ended up with this legislation is kind of watered down from the intent. I think that that's not to say that there's anything wrong with what we have in front of us. I think anything helps, but I do think that I don't know that we made it any easier to use this on law enforcement's behalf, because you get a group of people, they're walking on the sidewalk, there are 12 of them. Are you asking them if they live together and then taking their word for it, especially if they have out of state IDs? And I just don't know that where we landed with this compromise, again, to Scott's point, there are just different needs in different areas of the city. So I think it illustrates that his constituents are saying, this isn't necessary in our neighborhood, even though it technically already is, under executive order, where I'm saying in my neighborhood, I think we need to go farther. And I just think that, we sort of tried to please everybody with this legislation, and we might end up pleasing very few people. So.
All right. Councilmember Murphy had his hand up next, and then I'll get Len.
I had it in the chat box. I just clicked space. I appreciate both what members Harrington and Lepari-Shu are saying, and I think it's great that they're so responsive to their constituents. I would just counter with saying that if we were 8 individual cities, I think that would be a totally different discussion. But folks from the 6th ward aren't just staying in the 6th ward, same as folks in the 1st, 3rd, 5th, 8th, what have you, aren't. We're all integrated into the city. Some of the more densely populated areas have people going to the least densely populated areas. So I think it would not necessarily, and I totally understand what both of you are saying. And I think if it was a more of a situation where it were different communities, but it's one city with different areas, which constantly has people going in between at all times. So it's my opinion. I think this is probably the best way to go forward.
Can I just clarify my point?
Let Councilmember Carson have his hand up, and then Drenick, and then we'll get back to you, okay?
Okay.
Len?
Gary, if it gives Councilmember Lepari-Shu a little clarity, I'll yield for a minute.
Okay.
Thank you. I just wanted to say, I see Luke's point, but the regulation is on the location and not the people. And so it's really about when people are gathering in an area, and there just tend to be more people, no matter where they live, there tend to be more people downtown and in Center City and in areas that we can delineate. And we do that with other legislation. So it's not really about separating the city. It's about saying, like, purposefully, like, where is this necessary? And are we going to enact it there in a more straightforward way? So I see what you're saying, that the mask ordinance is for everyone, absolutely. But I think that what I'm trying to say is that I think that it's exceptionally important for people to be wearing masks when they are more likely to run into other people, and to be prepared to do so. And that is more likely to happen in certain areas of the city. So thank you.
Okay. Len, why don't you go?
Mayor. So through the discussions of this ordinance, we've heard from the police chief. I believe Councilmember Harrington just alluded to it or spoke directly about it, that the Oneonta Police Department has the ability already in place to enforce the executive orders. This ordinance is listing many, many different executive orders, and of which, from my research, that the Oneonta Police Department already has the ability to do it. And I also wanted remind fellow council members that it's only the police officers and or the code enforcement officers. They're the only ones that can witness this. So this isn't going to be neighbor A said that they saw neighbor B didn't do this. It's the police officers that are going to have to see this. Secondly, I have taken more engagement on this particular issue than anything else I've done since January 1st taking office. And overwhelming, it was 99% of them said they are totally against it. So I'm going to be voting no against this because the folks in the 5th Ward hired me to represent them. And out of all the ones that I either contacted or they contacted me, they said they did not want this. So where I'm at.
Okay, thank you. I think Mark Drenick had his hand up first. Did you, Mark?
I didn't, but I'm going to take the opportunity. Thank you.
Well, no, if you didn't have your hand up, let Dave Risberger go first because he had his hand up.
Go right
I'll
ahead.
get you next.
Yeah, Gary, I've got a question first, and then I have a statement. So my question is, I'd like to clarify with the chief, because I remember him saying that the way the public health law is written currently, that OPD does not have a good ability to be able to write tickets. Is that true, Chief?
Yeah, we do not have a good ability. There is a way to do it. To be honest, I'm not sure how. We'd have to write it in reference to either the public health law that cites following executive orders, or it's under executive law that then cites the executive order. I'm not positive exactly how to do it. There is a way around it. What you have to do is make sure that it doesn't fall into civil action versus criminal action, because that's where we run into some problems.
But if we write an ordinance, this makes it easier?
Yes, absolutely, because all I have to do is write a ticket, just like writing a littering ticket.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Gary, we have a public health law, and I guess what bothers me a little bit is, at least in the city of Oneonta, we don't hear too much of people complaining about having to wear a mask when they're out and about. At least I haven't heard that. But as soon as we're writing, we're making it, solidifying it and making it something that can be, a ticket can be written for it, then people get upset. Because, I mean, it makes me question, are they really wearing the mask? Did they really want to wear the mask? I'm looking at this, the reason why this is a public health law is this is about the greater good for the people of Oneonta and the people of New York State and the US. So this is bigger than any of one individual person. And it,
Dave, can you hear us? Okay, let's we'll go back to Dave when he thaws out. There he is.
all right. Can you hear me? What did you hear me last say? Sorry.
I have no
Bigger
idea.
than one person.
And in conclusion,
I think he froze up again. Have to call him.
he definitely froze up again.
Yeah. Somebody pour some warm water on him. Let's, God, Mark Drenick, why don't you speak and then we'll go back to Dave when he thaws out.
Okay. So for me, it's a matter of I wear a mask and you wear a mask, and it's safe for us to occupy the same space, which means that it's safe to shop, it's safe to dine, it's safe to support our Oneonta merchants. We can argue about the civil liberty infringements that I think are at the core of the concerns, but it is a public health issue, but it's also a marketing piece. And I hate to sound like that, but our community needs to know internally that it's safe to be in Oneonta, safe to be in downtown Oneonta. and our external communities who are very reluctant. I've heard so many stories of people who don't want to come into Oneonta for any reason because the perception that they have is that it's unsafe. I wear a mask, you wear a mask, we're absolutely safe to do business, to dine, to shop, and to experience, our downtown. And so I am absolutely in favor of this.
All right, Dave, give it another shot.
Yeah, I apologize. I'll just make it quick. This isn't any different than the seatbelt law or the car seat law that was implemented years ago. It's about public safety and the greater good for everybody. I don't see this as being overreach. I don't see this as any different than what the public health law, if the public health law isn't overreach, I don't see how solidifying that into an ordinance is an overreach. So I'm absolutely in favor.
Diane, I'm going to hold off because we typically have this for council members only during the discussion period. Even though we value your input.
Without
Katie,
my opinion, can I say something?
what's that? I
Can
didn't
I
hear
say
you.
something that's not my opinion?
Go ahead, because we love you, we'll let you.
Because I forgot to put this in the task force report. So maybe I can blame Dave. No. So I forgot to say that. So in our task force, Woody's there, Bob Wood, the town supervisor. And I forgot to forward his report, which included the fact that the town has passed this, basically the same ordinance, and that overwhelmingly the merchants, and this speaks to what Mark was talking about, the merchants in the town were very appreciative simply because they felt it gave them some added protection and safety in what sometimes has been difficult for them to enforce. So again, I'm not giving my opinion. I'm not a council member. I think you probably can infer my opinion, but
Okay.
just wanted to addend my task force report to that piece of
Got
information
it.
from Woody.
We got it. Okay, thank you. Did I see another hand up? Councilmember Harrington.
I've been good. I haven't talked all meeting.
Wait a minute. You already spoke on this subject once.
Just once. So, Dave, when you I'm going to counter you a little bit. The state made the seatbelt law. The city didn't go out and make its own seatbelt law. We didn't go ahead and put that in so that our police department could go write seatbelt tickets to keep the money into the city. They write it on the state. So that's just my little rebuttal there. And also I've talked to out in the town after the town's law was passed, and they're furious. And most of the merchants says it doesn't affect them one way or the other because they can escort people right off their property. And if they don't leave, they can go ahead and call the police department for trespass. So they said the law didn't help them really one way or another. So that's, just want to throw that back out there because I do go out and I ask questions. So, but with that, I'm not going to say any more on the subject, Gary.
You can say all you like, Scott. Anybody else for the discussion? Okay, then I'm going to call the vote. Councilmember Murphy.
Aye.
Councilmember Davies.
Abstain.
Councilmember Risberger.
Dave, we can hear you.
We'll come back to him.
He voted in the chat. He said
He voted
yes.
in the chat? Okay.
Yep.
He voted in the chat. He said yes. I'm going to assume David's not going to allow that.
No, I'm not. Sorry.
Well, I had a feeling I wouldn't get away with it. Okay, so I've got, all right, let me back up here. Dave,
Can you hear
talk
me?
now. Yes.
Now, yes.
quick.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All right, so backing up here now, we've got Councilmember Murphy voted yes, Councilmember Davies abstained, Councilmember Risberger voted yes, Councilmember Lepari Shu,
Yes.
Councilmember Carson,
No.
Councilmember Harrington,
No.
Councilmember Rafter,
Yes.
Councilmember Drenick.
Aye.
Okay, that is 5 yes votes, so it passes. Now, let me just clarify. This does not become law today. There is now a required public hearing, which will take place in 2 weeks from today. After that public hearing, I have the option of either vetoing this or signing it. If I choose to veto it, the council can override my veto with a minimum of 6 votes. Okay. All right, moving down the agenda. Additional
I'm
business.
sorry to interrupt. Gary,
Yeah.
I'm sorry to interrupt. Could you just
it's okay.
elaborate for the folks that are watching this video? In 2 weeks, the public hearing, is that just on that alone or just before our common council meeting?
It's part of the common council meeting, during the common council meeting.
Right.
It's,
And
go ahead.
the public will have the ability to get on and voice their concerns.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yes. And it's called the mayor's public hearing because the council already voted. The idea is for me to hear from the public before I make my decision as to whether to sign it or veto. But yes, there'll be an opportunity for Kerry does her magic to arrange for anybody who wants to comment to be able to speak. Okay, any additional business? Okay, I'm not aware of any correspondence. I will entertain a motion to go into executive session to discuss contract negotiation. Moved by Councilmember Carson, second by Councilmember Lepari Shu. All in favor, just raise your hand. Okay, and we need the magic transport and we need to bring Katie Botker along with us.
As Scott would say, beam me up, Scotty.
Okay. All right, just press join breakout room.
I think we all.
Okay. I believe that there is no more business to conduct tonight. I'm ready for bed. So with that, if there are no objections, thank you all for a productive meeting, lots of discussion. We are adjourned.